Welcome, everyone. I'm going to share some slides with you from my computer. So I will get those started. And as you heard, I will be presenting about the science of a meaningful life. And also, as you heard, one of the main tasks that I perform at the Greater Good Science Center is teaching the science of happiness. When I teach the science of happiness, I'm very careful to make sure people understand that happiness does not mean feeling pleasure all the time or maximizing material possessions or being entertained every minute. In fact, happiness is much deeper and richer and relies on having a sense of meaning in our lives. I wanted to share this quote from a philosopher from many years ago, which says, "The purpose of life is not to be happy at all. It is to be useful, to be honorable. It is to be compassionate. It is to matter, to have it make some difference that you lived." And I like this quote because it explains how important purpose and meaning are to happiness in life. I'll also share a definition of what some academics and scientists from the United States think about what purpose means. This is a quote from a professor in business at the University of California named Morten Hansen. And what Morten Hansen says is that you have a sense of purpose when you make valuable contributions to others or to society that you find personally meaningful and that don't harm anyone. So once again, you see that purpose and meaning are tied to the ways that we contribute to the welfare of others, to the ways that we participate in community, in collective goals, instead of trying to work towards our own self-interest. So you might ask, where does meaning come from? What are the ways that we understand scientifically that purpose and meaning come from certain activities and not others? And there are a few different sources. One I just mentioned, and that is this deep personal sense of drive or motivation to invest in the welfare of others, to nurture others, to console others when they're going through difficult times, and to form and maintain long-term social bonds. I show you an image of primates because this is not something unique to humans. In fact, humans as mammals have evolved as what's known as an ultra-social species. An ultra-social species is an organism that survives because it works together, because we can coordinate effort, because we can collaborate in order to reach greater goals. Some people think that humans are primarily selfish and competitive and interested in serving their own needs. Actually, when researchers study human behavior and the impulse, the initial responses to social opportunities, humans, like primates, make choices that are pro-social. I heard you speaking about gratitude and the exercise of writing a gratitude letter before I joined your program. Gratitude is an example of a pro-social emotional experience and also an example of a pro-social view of the world, reverence for what is good in life, noticing others who contribute to what is good in our own lives. Meaning is also tied to the extent to which we feel like we are serving the needs and the benefit of a group, of the community. One of the pioneering researchers in positive psychology, Roy Bauermeister, wrote that humans have a fundamental and intrinsic need to belong. We know from research on childhood and development that individuals who form trusting and safe attachments to their caregivers end up being healthier for the whole course of their lives. They end up having less vulnerability to a variety of mental challenges and disease. People who are left in a kind of conflict with their caregivers or who were neglected by their caregivers have a different circumstance, which is they are more vulnerable to disease and disorder and challenges, both mental and physical. So our interpersonal connections, our relationships are so fundamental to our health and well-being. I'm showing you a figure from a study done by Joshua Rand at Harvard University. And these researchers, they brought participants into the laboratory and they gave them a chance to share a resource. And what the resource was some money. And they invited them to split the money with others, somebody else who they would never see and they had never met, and they would never hear from after the study. And what they showed here is that when people decided how much to split quickly, so in less than 10 seconds, they gave more than what people gave if they decided to share, taking a longer time to think about it. And what these researchers concluded is that people's intuitive decision, people's innate impulse is to share more generously. And in fact, it takes more effort and more thought to behave in selfish ways. Several research teams have replicated this finding using biological methodologies. For example, researchers put participants into a brain scanner. They slid them into the brain scanner and had them either share fairly or give generously or keep a greater proportion of a resource for themselves. And what they showed is that when people behave more selfishly, they recruit structures in the brain that are involved in higher order thinking and decision making. Structures in the brain that consume cognitive resources. And again, the findings suggest that when we act selfishly, we have to think harder about that decision. A third study showed using a method called transcranial magnetic stimulation. That means they put a big instrument over the outside of participants' heads, that if you stimulate the part of the brain that is really important for thinking carefully, and by stimulating it, you make it less functional, right? Stimulating it with these magnets, it makes it unable to perform, that people act more generously. So again, all of this research suggests that our innate and intuitive and intrinsic motivation and desire is to behave in ways that are fair and generous and contribute to the community, contribute to fairness and equality. And at the level of purpose and meaning, these are central. We find meaning from behaviors and actions that serve the group and serve the welfare of the collective. When researchers look at the brain and which areas are most important for generosity, what they've reported is that generosity elicits activation in the same reward areas that are activated by obtaining a reward for oneself. So for many years, there was a theory that giving away one's own resources would be unpleasant, that it would activate pathways and structures in the brain that made us feel threatened, like we had lost something. Now, researchers studying that question have been able to show that actually, when we give people a chance to give generously to a cause, to another person, to support others, in fact, those kinds of actions activate reward pathways in the brain. So you may have heard of the neurotransmitter dopamine that signals pleasure in the brain. What this figure shows you is the dark blue areas are activated when people are generous, when they make giving choices, and the activation is greater amongst people who are older, later in their life. So there's a relationship to age. People on average become more generous and experience more pleasure in giving as they get older. And also people who score higher on self-report surveys that measure generosity and sharing and fairness show that they have greater activation, greater reward activation in response to generosity, in response to sharing. So there are neural regions and pathways that reinforce generosity, that drive and motivate us to serve each other and benefit one another. And that is one of the biological underpinnings of why meaning and purpose is tied to generosity and prosociality. Other neuroscientific research has shown that there are specific areas in the brain that are involved in empathy. Empathy is having a feeling and a motivational state in response to another person's emotional expression. The kind of empathy that is most healthy and most beneficial is the kind of empathy that enables us to share in positive emotional experiences, to laugh when we are around our friends laughing, when we see something that brings joy to another person, we feel joy, and the kind of empathy that arouses the urge to caregive, to support, and to bring ease and relief to others who are going through a difficult time. So it turns out in the brain, there are pathways and structures that are dedicated to helping us feel an emotion when we see another person's emotion. So we feel something in our own body, and a second set of pathways and structures that are involved in helping us understand other people's emotions. And these two systems are involved in how we relate to one another in social contexts, how we come to understand the point of view of another person, how we can put ourselves in their shoes to communicate effectively. So once again, from a biological perspective, humans are built with these structures, these systems, these anatomical features that prompt us to engage with one another, to serve one another, and cooperate in ways that bring us meaning and purpose in our lives. So when I teach happiness, as I mentioned at the very beginning, I start by sharing a scientific definition that emphasizes the importance of meaning. Again, often people believe that happiness means you feel cheerful, you're laughing all the time, you're enthusiastic, and you never feel upset. You never feel the emotions that are important for life's difficulties and challenges. In fact, scientifically, happiness means that we do have an easy time feeling emotions like joy and contentment, but that we also hold a belief that our life is meaningful and worthwhile. And the important thing is that oftentimes difficulties in life present us with the greatest opportunity to behave in ways that engender or promote or foster that sense of meaning and purpose. When we are feeling grief or sadness about a loss, this prompts us to address the circumstances in our lives that are associated with that loss in productive and beneficial ways. For example, we may reach out to friends and others in our community to strengthen our social ties or invite support for our own feelings, or invest our own effort in an endeavor or activity that actually changes how the environment looks so that others will not suffer the same loss and sadness and grief that we suffered ourselves. And the same story can be told for experiences of anger or frustration about an injustice. The same story can be told about experiences of fear and stress. They are important. These unpleasant emotions are very important to informing us and directing us towards behaviors that can contribute to our sense of meaning and purpose. Now, of course, happy people don't spend long periods of time dwelling in unpleasant emotions. We feel them and then understand how to channel and apply them towards what is going to be most curative, what is going to bring us that sense of meaning and purpose. There are a couple other words that you might encounter when you begin to study and speak about human happiness. Subjective well-being is a synonym. We can use those terms interchangeably. Eudaimonia, this is a term from ancient Greek and Italian philosophers, and it really means living a life with a sense of meaning and purpose, flourishing, thriving. One of the interesting things about positive psychology and science of happiness is that it's a young science. It's a relatively new science. And because of that, there are lots of different terms and concepts that different people speak about that sometimes overlap. They share meaning. And what we'll continue to do in studying this space is understand how to find consensus and agreement and healthy dialogue around which term can tell us the most about human happiness. I wanted to talk about some of the myths that people hold about meaning and purpose and happiness in life. One of them is that it's genetic, that we have a set point. It's often called a set point, meaning that we're born with however much capacity for being inspired by a sense of meaning or having passion and perseverance towards a goal. And some people are lucky, they have it, and some people just don't. And the reason this is a myth is because when researchers invite people to try exercises or practices that strengthen things about their lives and their behaviors This leads to measurable and systemic changes in their sense of meaning and in association, their sense of well-being, subjective well-being and happiness in life. Some of the key thinkers in this space are Michael Steger and Barry Schwartz, both who have studied purpose and meaning and well-being abundantly in the literature. Most studies of or measures of happiness, and I understand you all have heard about how scientists assess and measure happiness, include some question about one's sense of meaning or purpose. And again, through activities, through behaviors, through specific ways of using our time, people's scores on measures of meaningful well-being, on happiness in life change. And again, this suggests that there are elements and aspects of meaning in life that are not limited by our genetic predisposition. Of course, everyone's genetic predisposition has an influence and is involved. Your early life experiences have an influence. They're involved in where you are right now if you were to take a survey about happiness, but it's not a limiting factor. It's not fixed. It's not determined. From wherever you are, there is potential for increasing your sense of meaning and your purpose and your well-being in life. The second myth, which I've already spoken about, is that meaning comes from pleasure, right? It comes from being entertained or securing material possessions or fulfilling expectations, that there's a materialistic path to meaning. I'm showing you a figure here from a study where researchers measured materialism, right? The idea that what will bring me happiness is having all of my material needs met. And often you could make an example, like if I just have a nice house, if I just have beautiful clothes, if I just have a place to take a vacation, if I have the newest technology, if I have all those things, I will be happy. A lot of us have this belief, and it's not because we're silly. It's often because of the marketing and popular media that we are so abundantly exposed to. We see so many signals that tell the story that if we only had the special car, we would be happy. If we only had the beautiful spouse, we would be happy. When in fact, when researchers study the relationship between materialism and life satisfaction, people who are more materialistic are less happy, right? They're less satisfied with their lives. They look back and they feel less content about their meaningful contributions and their sense of well-being. One of the pathways that is involved, which is related to an idea that you all have discussed, is through gratitude. It turns out that being materialistic, believing that pleasure and entertainment and consumerism will bring you happiness, makes you a less grateful person. You tend to be less grateful. And when you're less grateful, you're less likely to enjoy the benefits of feeling like your needs are satisfied and just having that sense of satisfaction in life. So once again, a materialistic view about happiness or about meaning in life is actually counterproductive. Another researcher who studies this space is Tom Gilovich at Cornell University. And Tom Gilovich surveys people on the verge of investing in either a material possession or investing in a shared experience. And he measures their level of of anticipation, of joyful enthusiasm. And then he also measures their feelings later, afterwards. How good do they feel when they think about that investment? And it turns out both anticipation and feelings of contentment and satisfaction about the investment are more positive when in the group that was investing in a shared experience, and less robust in the group that was instructed to invest in a material possession. So while we may think that material possessions and superficial signs of status or power or accomplishment are really important to our sense of meaning, they're not as important as our actual behaviors, as our actions, as our experiences, right? Experiences are about engaging in the world in novel and growth-oriented ways. So many of us also hold the idea that meaning comes from status, right? That if we get the recognition of our professional success, then we'll have a sense that the work that we do is the most meaningful. It turns out, and I'm going to draw from research by Adam Grant, who is a professor of business at the Wharton School at the University of Pennsylvania, has studied people's feelings about recognition and achievement compared to their feelings about investing in the welfare of others. And it turns out that when people are reminded that the work that they do, that the investments that they've made have influenced others in a beneficial way, that is a more powerful contribution to their sense of meaning and happiness than a reward, than a bonus. A third study in the workplace also had employees who were doing a task that involved building circuits, right? A technology type of job. And the test was, at the end of the day, some of the employees got a bonus for a certain amount of money. Another group of employees got a gift certificate for a restaurant. And a third group of employees got a phone call from the person, their boss, from the boss of the organization, from the leader of the company. And the researchers wanted to know which of those was most motivating, which contributed to how much work they did the next day. And so the next day they measured how productive were each of these employee groups. And all three groups were more productive the next day. And there was really little difference between the money bonus, the gift certificate, and the call from the boss. But the interesting finding was the next day, the third day. On the third day, what the researchers showed was that the money bonus and the gift certificate were associated with a decline in productivity. But the call from the boss that said, what you do really matters, your work is so important to the organization and to our success as a team, that call, the people who got that call, their productivity stayed high, and it stayed high for as long as the researchers measured, for several weeks. And so again, this idea that material possessions, entertainment, recognition, status, that is how we measure meaning, doesn't align with the scientific data. We all, why, right? Why do we believe, or why do we walk around with these ideas about meaning that maybe lead us in the wrong directions? Well, one of the reasons is that as a culture, we have just inaccurate norms. So the idea, again, from popular media, from stories that we read about or see on television, that really make it seem like happiness is tied to status or power or material possessions, really shape how we think about our own lives and our own experiences in ways that make it more difficult to actually find meaning. It's not uncommon for humans to aspire very passionately towards a goal that doesn't align with their core values, with what is most important to them in life. And to reach that goal and to find themselves in this coveted and celebrated position, and then look around and realize they're miserable. They're not happy. Their lives are not satisfying. And that has to do with, again, pursuing goals because of expectations or ideas from culture that don't match our core values as humans. Other things that get in the way of finding meaning is only focusing on threatening or unpleasant information, believing that nothing is possible, believing that we're unable to help. This is one of the key challenges that people are facing in the pandemic times that we're all living through. Feeling like we're powerless to make a difference can be quite problematic in the face of seeking meaning. If we're in a situation or a context where the challenge or the difficulty is so vast and complex and outside of our domain of expertise that we don't have a sense of being able to contribute meaningfully to solving that problem, we can end up feeling ineffective, like we're unable to be impactful. One of the problems with that thought is that the goal, right, the hope that we're holding ourselves accountable for is unrealistic, right? So having an unrealistic goal that deprives us of the sense of impact or progress can leave us feeling ineffective and thus unmotivated to pursue the activities and the behaviors that bring us true meaning. So often the solutions to this kind of circumstances to identify and reflect on the kinds of ways that you can contribute to the challenges that you're facing. So while you may not be able to provide the world, the globe, with an effective vaccine for the coronavirus, you might be able to support a neighbor who can't fulfill their own needs because of the challenges of the pandemic. Maybe you can bring their groceries, or maybe you can call them on the phone and have a conversation so they don't feel lonely. And those investments, those activities are wildly important, and they are signs of progress and impact that often we prioritize or we undervalue. And so, again, thinking about our goals in a way that matches our strengths and our capacities, and then acknowledging the benefit that we contribute, that we are responsible for on terms that are local, can be quite beneficial to that sense of meaning. Thinking of our relationships, our interactions with each other, and our work in solely transactional terms is a barrier to finding meaning and purpose. Transactional means I only do what I do so that I can get money, right? I only help someone if I think they're going to help me back. When we have this reciprocal transactional idea about our own value or our own motivation to contribute, we end up not recognizing the ways that our true values, our morally aligned values, play into our sense of meaning. And then the last and perhaps most troublesome challenge to finding meaning in our lives is feeling like we just don't have any time to think about it, right? To just schedule ourselves. And this is the cartoon says, live each moment. It's the meditation teacher talking to the seeker. Live each moment, practice being mindful. And then he says, be present, but hold on, I have to take this. He's reaching for his cell phone. So again, we know empirically that in today's very complex and highly information rich and technologically supported society that we live in, it's easy to be so scheduled, to have so many tasks and so much to think about that we simply don't dwell in the core values that are most important to us. We're always distracted by some information that is bombarding our minds in a way that we just simply don't have any space left to connect with what is most meaningful, to act in the service of others, to even notice or attune to the others around us who we might be able to form meaningful bonds with. So those are some of the barriers, and many of the practices that we'll talk about in the next part of my presentation with you have to do with changing something about your time and your priorities and the way your habits of mind so that you can connect with what's most meaningful to you. So on this little diagram, I lay out the different opportunities that are most tied to increasing our sense of meaning in life. So first on the top is optimism. This is imagining that there's a future that is an improvement upon the present. Just being able to believe and imagine that is an important part of having a sense of meaning and purpose. It gives us confidence and a sense of efficacy and agency and motivation to move forward. Mindfulness, being able to recognize what it is that's happening in our bodies and our minds right when it's happening, is a way to ground our experiences when they're occurring without being catastrophic, without being so distracted, but that we can't really, again, dwell in our sense of meaning and purpose, and how any moment that we are present, any moment that we experience can be connected to our sense of meaning and purpose, to our values. Connecting with others. In the first part of my presentation, I talked about how important our connections were, how valuable our social bonds are to our sense, our friendships, our community are to sort of enabling us to behave in ways that serve others and in turn our sense of meaning and purpose. Gratitude, recognizing that we have positivity in life and that our positivity often comes from something outside of ourselves, and more often comes from other people. We'll talk a little bit and we'll try a practice that gets us better at expressing gratitude to other people that you can use even when you write your gratitude letter. Compassion, I've studied how compassion actually strengthens our resilience to setbacks and difficulties by empowering us to be agents of change, by giving us that urge to alleviate other people's pain and suffering, and in turn experience the benefit of meaningful impact. We've done something that has helped someone. This is intrinsically rewarding and fulfills our sense of purpose. Generosity, when we invest in others, even if they're not going through a difficult time, right? Even if they're not experiencing challenge, but simply for the sake of promoting their sense of joy and investing in their success, this is a source of meaning. Oftentimes, we schedule our lives so that we don't have opportunities for informal interactions with each other, for levity, for play, for amusement. And it turns out that these informal interactions, these moments of shared joy with one another, are quite valuable to our sense of connection and safety and interdependence with others. And so this is another opportunity. Awe, this experience of being inspired and elevated, of being in the presence of something greater than ourselves. Research on awe, which I'll share with you, shows that people feel humbled. They feel a sense of groundedness and belonging when they spend time in environments or circumstances that induce or evoke that sense of awe. So these are 8 tips or practical strategies that people can turn to and practice in order to bring more meaning and, in turn, purpose and happiness into life. So I'm going to share specifically some of the exercises that we can try, and we're going to try a few together. One of the principles of well-being in life I call positivity, and this is very similar to what's written here: optimism, the capacity to experience positive emotions easily when things are going well, the capacity to savor and enhance what is good in your lives. The first principle is to prioritize experiences over things. So instead of, when you have a choice, what am I going to do with this afternoon? I've got some free time. Make the decision to spend that time doing an activity that is associated with learning and growth and sensory activation, and not securing an object or a material possession. If you can arrange time with friends and ask them about what has gone well, there's an exercise called capitalizing on positive events. And what it means is that when you get together with a friend, if you can safely do so in person or even on a video conference or over the telephone, instead of spending the whole time talking about difficulty, about challenge, about anxiety, about grief and sadness, can you ensure that you spend some of the time in the conversation talking about what has gone well and asking questions to the other person about what has gone well? These are strategies for invoking that sense of levity and lightness, and even adopting a more playful, unstructured demeanor with the people who you're sharing time with. If any of you have access to safely interact with children and play in ways that are directed by the children, right? Children are not holding in their minds all the worries and the pressure and the frustrations that most adults walk around with. They simply want to have an informal, unstructured interaction with another person. And when adults let themselves do that, they free up their minds to simply follow along. This is very, it's a meaningful contribution to that sense of lightness, of balance in their mental lives. Spending time out in nature. So we call the benefits to human experience of spending time in nature biophilia. Researchers have shown when you measure the bodies of people who go on a hike or a walk in nature and pay attention to the trees, to the sky and the clouds, to the grass, to the pattern of debris on the floor of this forest, that exercise is associated with lower blood pressure, with improvements to well-being. So being out in nature is associated with physiological and psychological benefits. Adopting a lens towards other people that assumes trust and friendliness is an important exercise in optimism. Many of us adopt a habit of seeing others as a threat, as a competition, someone who might deprive us of a coveted resource. And this habit of approaching others in this way gets in the way of our ability to connect with others in meaningful ways. Research shows that when we have what's called small talk or informal conversations with strangers or people we don't know very well, that this is associated with meaningful belonging and trust in our communities and a sense of common humanity, right? Of belonging to humans most broadly in a way that is inspiring and associated with, again, or drives our sense of urge to connect with other humans and invest in their welfare. There are a couple of writing exercises that people can do to sort of adopt or strengthen this habit of optimism. One is to write down what's going well. Believe it or not, our habits of mind, if we don't invest in them, veer in whatever direction our experiences in the world might have guided them. And if we want them to be different, if we find that we're very pessimistic and skeptical about ourselves and the world and possibility, it's up to us to act and practice in ways that change that. And so these are all exercises you can do in writing. Write down what's going well. If you do this and you write about it and you describe it in detail every night for a week, you end up being more optimistic because you naturally begin to think of and bring to mind the things that are positive, that go well, and the possibility that what you do could lead to positive outcomes in the future. There's another exercise where you write about what the best possible version of who you are could be in 5 years. So it's shown to be very motivating and to engender that sense of purpose and inspiration to work towards that best possible self. Noting your progress, the accomplishments, the achievements that you've made on a given day is called 3 small wins, right? I'm writing about what I've done well, what I have been able to accomplish. Again, I haven't been able to cure coronavirus, but I have been able to make a wonderful meal for my family that we all enjoyed and connected during the conversation, right? I was able to create an experience that was bonding. I was able to respond to an email from a colleague in a thorough and heartfelt and instructive way. So little things that we do that give us that sense of accomplishment. We can just practice keeping track of them instead of always thinking about the things that aren't done and that we haven't been able to do. And then finally, it can be helpful to write about what was funny, what was amusing that happened in your day. Again, oftentimes our mind kind of sort of veer towards what is difficult or what is challenging or what is unpleasant, what we have to worry about. And this is just a mental habit. And exercises like these where we just purposefully write about things that bring us those important experiences that contribute to positivity will shift our habits of thought in the direction of meaning, purpose, and well-being. I want to just try a little exercise together. I know we're not all in the same room together, but I want to just give you instructions and a little bit of time to share. If you can't turn to another person safely because of social distancing mandates, then just imagine, right? Just imagine that you are speaking to a friend. If you can turn to another person in a safe way, just for 3 minutes, share with them the most awe-inspiring, tingly, amazing experience that you've gotten to enjoy recently. I show you a picture of a child because often researchers who study awe, which is this experience of being in the presence of something that challenges our sense of normalcy or of ordinary life, of typical challenges. That's what awe is, right? And that's happening all the time for small children because they don't have fixed ideas yet about how the world should be. They don't know as much. They don't have as much expectation about what should be happening. And so they're always surprised and amazed by what's going on. So let's take a maybe a minute to think on, and if you can, share with another person your most recent experience. I'm going to start a timer now for 1 minute, and I'll stop sharing the screen.
Allora, traduciamo a voce questo stimolo che ci dà Emiliana. Hi Emiliana.
Hi.
Ci chiede di raccontare alla persona che è vicino a noi, se abbiamo qualcuno vicino a noi, altrimenti semplicemente immaginare di raccontarla, quindi di parlare proprio un po' da soli, di un'esperienza che abbiamo avuto nell'ultima settimana, corretto? Non vedo più la slide, che fosse proprio un'esperienza di stupore, un po' come l'immagine del bambino che aveva proiettato, un'esperienza che ci ha fatto proprio cascare la mascella, e appunto provare a pensare nell'ultima settimana qual è stata questa esperienza e immaginarsi di raccontarla molto brevemente a chi è vicino a noi o appunto immaginandoci soltanto di farlo.
Okay. I'm sure many of you could have a rich and lengthy conversation about your most recent experience of awe. And next time you are in a position to speak with a friend or a family member and you're wondering what to talk about, this is a great topic. When's the last time you felt amazed by some experience that you had? Where were you and what was it like? Why is this helpful? Why does this matter? When researchers study the impact of people's experiences, and this research has been done on military veterans, so people who have experienced traumatic events. It's been done on children from underprivileged backgrounds, and it's been done in normal, healthy populations. And what the research suggests is that when people experience awe in their daily lives, and often it is through being immersed in nature, from witnessing carefully how the world around us is incredible and amazing, they are also more satisfied with their lives, and they tend to do better on longitudinal measures of well-being. Again, the idea is that awe makes us feel more humble and connected to the people around us, and in turn, aligned with our core values as a person in the collective. We are invested and part of a meaningful whole. This research has also been done in older adults. A study just was published by Virginia Sturm at the University of California, San Francisco, where she had older adults go on a walk. And again, while they were on the walk, to pay attention to the minutiae, to the details of nature, and really appreciate that. And compared that to older adults who just went for a regular walk without thinking about anything special. And those that went on the awe walk, right, where they were paying attention to the remarkable qualities of nature and the world around them, had benefits to their physiology. Their blood pressure was reduced, and they reported more benefits to their psychological well-being. They were less stressed. They were more joyful. Mindfulness. So how can we relate to our own experiences in a nurturing way in the moments that we're experiencing whatever it is that's happening around us. There are multiple practices for this. Many are quite popular and available. So yoga has become a prominent exercise, and yoga is a version of mindfulness practice, noticing what's happening in our bodies and noticing what's happening in our minds. Again, the point of mindfulness, of having this awareness, is that number one, it allows us to be deliberate about the kinds of mental experiences that we're having and to align them with our core values, with our sense of meaning and purpose, rather than living in a very reflexive, fear-based sort of mental space that might urge us towards being self-interested and vigilant to threat. Other techniques that are beneficial for mindfulness, when we become more emotionally intelligent. Emotional intelligence means that we understand our own emotions, that we read other people's emotions, that we're able to regulate and manage our emotional experiences, and that we're able to use emotions in conversations with other people and interactions with others in ways that are beneficial. And I'm just giving a few small ideas here. One of them is to develop your emotion vocabulary. Have more words for describing the emotions that you experience when you experience them. This is called labeling. When we label our emotions, especially the unpleasant emotions, it immediately enables them to recover, and it brings us to a better capacity to restore that sense of balance and ease that allows us to think about and connect with purpose, with meaning in life. Sharing our emotions with others, and it's called disclosing. When we actually tell another person about how we're feeling, we end up feeling less that way. And then self-distancing, which means that when we think about our emotions, instead of really focusing on ourselves, we try to think about our emotions as if we were looking at ourselves from the outside. Almost imagine that you are a child, and when you're thinking about your emotion, you're your own parent, right? And you're naming that feeling. That's what self-distancing means. And it turns out when people relate to especially difficult or unpleasant emotions in that self-distanced way, it's also called decentering, their unpleasant emotions subside. Thinking about challenges or difficulties as a challenge instead of a threat. This is work by Carol Dweck, is associated with, again, that mindful orientation. So recognizing, rather than this difficulty that I face is something that makes me feel worried and incapable, this difficulty that I'm facing is something that I'm going to work towards. I feel excited to confront. This reframing is something we can do as we develop skills of mindfulness. Self-compassion instead of self-criticism. So many of us walk around with a very hostile attitude towards our own experiences, and the belief that if we are very critical of ourselves, that we will improve, right? That's the way to reach our goals, is by being very critical of our own progress or our own capacity. Kristin Neff is the researcher who really pioneered the science of self-compassion and has shown that having a self-compassionate attitude, which is really relating to your own difficulties or insecurities or setbacks or failures in a supportive and nurturing way, that this is associated with well-being, with that sense of meaning, and actually predicts greater accomplishment of goals, greater achievement than being highly self-critical. Compassion is another core element of mindfulness and a way to connect with our core sense of purpose. I just want to give us another quick exercise. I don't think we'll take 3 minutes, but it's an opportunity to just try mindfulness if you haven't yet. And it's the most simple kind. It's not about a fancy or elaborate visualization. It's not about having to do a special pose with your body. It's really just breathing in a particular way that activates your vagus nerve. So your vagus nerve, which is shown in this image on the right, is your 10th cranial nerve. And one of the key things that it does is slow down your heart rate when you exhale. And it turns out if you purposefully do this, you activate your vagus nerve. And when you activate your vagus nerve, you're also imposing calming effects on your physiology. So you're activating what's called the parasympathetic nervous system. And this system is involved in what's called resting and digesting, or also affiliation, right? Connecting with others in benevolent ways. So in order to activate your vagus nerve, all you need to do is breathe and pay attention to the pace of your breath, but in a gentle way, right? Not in a forceful way. So for 1 minute, let's just practice this. And what it's going to involve is trying to breathe about 5 or 6 times. Take about 10 seconds for each breath that you take, and breathe in over the course of 4 seconds, and then breathe out over the course of 6 seconds. So make your exhale a little bit slower than your inhale. Okay, let's go ahead and get started. All right. I'm sorry to interrupt. I hope that very brief exercise was restorative for you and gave you some explanation for why you might see so much emphasis on mindfulness and yoga and contemplative and meditation practices. There is a robust literature in neuroscience and psychology that justifies this popular activity by showing its benefits to our health and well-being. One of the ideas for why mindfulness works is called the mindfulness to meaning theory. This is from a team that includes psychologists like Barbara Fredrickson, who is one of the pioneers of studying positive emotions. And what she shows, and you'll see some of the same terms that I have shared already, that is that when people experience difficulty, so stress, but they relate to that stress in a manner that is mindful. So decentering is the same as self-distancing. Those are the same, the terms decenter and self-distance or psychological distancing are the same. And mindfulness kind of does that. It gets us into a place of not worrying about what happened earlier or what might happen later, not planning, not using our mind in a kind of runaway fashion, but instead decentering, having what's called metacognitive awareness. So what's happening in our minds and knowing that we're actually thinking and being aware of what it is that we're thinking about. Doing that really broadens our awareness. And when we broaden our awareness, we pave the way for positive interpretations and for noticing what it is, goodness that's occurring around us or that's possible, and that these positive emotions enable us to connect with everything in our kind of repertoire of knowledge and lived experience that has been positive, that has been affirming and joyful, and savoring that connects us with what's meaningful, with what brings us the most meaning. Because, as we'll find, when we reflect, when we notice what it is that is sustainably good about ourselves, our experiences, the world around us, it is experiences that are aligned with our purpose and our values. And it's often not the material possessions or the momentary achievements that we have enjoyed. So this figure, again, sort of highlights this relationship between mindfulness and positive emotional experience and our sense of meaning and well-being in life. So we'll move on to social connection. What can we do to strengthen our social connections? This is really about ensuring that you feel like you can count on others and other people count on you. When we know that other people count on us, this is inherently meaningful to us, right? This is our sense of purpose. We actually serve a role in the collective, in the lives of others. So there are exercises that we can use to strengthen our sense of common humanity. Often it's simply taking track of what it is we share with others, what we do, what ways that we think about the same important values. Right now in the United States, we have a tremendous amount of polarization between political parties and ideals. And it's quite challenging and quite harmful to our society. And so at the Greater Good Science Center, we're investing a lot of our effort in trying to help people understand and realize common values and aspects of their lived experience that are shared. Because when we recognize that, when we notice what we have in common, it's much easier and more fruitful to have conversations about topics that we may disagree about. There are exercises that strengthen our sense of humility and our interest in, or our commitment to activities that support something beyond ourselves. So awe, for example, spending time in nature, going to a place or a location that inspires your sense of appreciation for beauty and the divine is also involved in that sense of humility, which connects us to the people around us. Practicing ease or calmness in connecting with other people and accepting support. In the US, researchers have shown that many people believe that others don't want to help them, that it's an imposition to ask for help, that others help only from a place of obligation, and thus we avoid asking for support and help. In fact, when we measure in the laboratory how people feel about being asked to help or provide support, or how they feel about having provided support or having helped someone, that those people feel joy and meaning in having committed those acts, in having benefited others in those meaningful ways. So again, that idea that we can do everything by ourselves, that we shouldn't ask others for help, and that helping others is somehow costly and exhausting to us is inaccurate. It is not correct. And so scientists have been working to provide exercises and activities that can restore our sense of common humanity, our faith in the role that our connections and our investment in others plays in our sense of purpose and well-being. So the cartoon here is about a similarity practice, and it's two snails looking at a tape dispenser, and one snail says, "I don't care if she's a tape dispenser, I love her." And it speaks to how similarity is involved in our sense of affection and affiliation and trust in others. There's a wonderful study that looks at conflict resolution and shows that when people go on a walk together in the moment of of trying to resolve a conflict, and their bodies are moving in a synchronized way, right? They're moving in synchrony. The feelings of similarity that arise as a function of that synchrony, of that synchronous movement, contribute to their ability to resolve conflict. So even at the most kind of unexpected levels, that sense of similarity, of shared humanity, contributes to our social connection in meaningful ways. I want to try one more practice before our time runs out. And you've already heard about a gratitude letter, but what I want you to do now is bring to mind something that happened or came up that was good for you that had to do with another person's effort. So another person put forth effort to act in a way that brought forth something good for you. And if you can turn to someone in the room, wonderful. If you can't, just think it in your mind. You can imagine doing this, or you can write it down. And the point of this exercise, called Gratitude 1, 2, 3, is that you say thank you, but when you say thank you, you include 3 pieces of information. You describe what the person did. So what did they do precisely that you're thanking them for? You acknowledge the effort that went into what they did. So what did they invest in doing that? And what did they even forego in order to be able to do that? And explain how the person's actions benefited you. Now, if we were all in a room together and we could all naturally do this exercise, I would give you 3 minutes, and I would have each person take a turn saying thank you to another person with in mind an experience from their own lives. But for this moment, let's take 1 minute to either write it down or say it to someone next to you if that's available. And I'm going to start my 1 minute timer right now. All right. Thank you. I'm sorry to interrupt. I know all of these practices could take much more time and could be more rich and fulfilling if we had more time. So I invite you to please try them after we're done. Next time you want to thank someone who has done something nice for you, don't just say thank you for doing that nice thing, right? Say thank you for exactly what they did. And I appreciate that you worked for helping me in this way, that you put effort into it. You could have done something else, like keep it for yourself or enjoy a coffee, but you helped me instead. And by helping me, something improved in my own life. So doing these 3 things makes your gratitude expression richer, whether you're saying it or writing it. We know from a rich literature on science of gratitude that it benefits so many things listed under the column that says increase. So people experience more positive emotions, they're more optimistic, they score higher on happiness, they tend to attain their goals and be more perseverant. They're welcome spiritually transcendent experiences. They tend to see others in more benevolent ways. They support and provide and receive support from others. Other people think that they're more friendly and attractive, and they tend to make friends. And as leaders, they tend to be more successful and well liked by the people who they lead. On the other column on the right, gratitude is associated with less discomfort and illness. It decreases stress, both in everyday and chronic and post-traumatic. People who are more grateful or who learn and practice gratitude score lower on anxiety and depression. They're less envious, and they tend to be less entitled and materialistic or possessive about consumer goods. And they experience less conflict and hostility with others. So there's a long and rich field of research on the benefits of gratitude. And I could teach a whole course on that, but we'll leave it at that. And I will finally share that everything that I have spoken about is easy for you to find. So I know you've all been listening to me speak in English, and for many of you, it's not your native language. I appreciate the effort that you've put into that, and that it might have been difficult to grasp everything that I said in our short time together. The good news is that all of these exercises that I described and many, many more are available online to you for free at any time. There's a website. The link is right here, ggia.berkeley.edu. And what it is a library of practices from positive psychology that one can introduce into their daily life to improve your sense of meaning and purpose in the service of happiness and well-being. So please visit that and try as many of the practices. I was only able to share a few with you. There are so many more. And all of them are taken from published research where scientists have evaluated systematically the impact of engaging with these practices and shown that they benefit well-being in different ways. So I'd like to thank you for joining me. If you like to hear podcasts, we also have a Science of Happiness podcast. Again, it's in English, but they're like 20-minute episodes. And what we do is we invite a guest to the podcast. The guest chooses one of the happiness practices from the prior slide, and we ask them to try it, and we ask them how it impacted them and what difference it made in their lives. And then we have a quick conversation with the research scientist who published the study and the findings that suggest that that particular practice is of benefit to well-being and meaning in life. So if you're interested in that, it's also available to you for free. Please find it at your convenience. And on this last slide, I list a few other resources that I would love to invite you to visit and try. Thank you so much for including me in your program. It is an honor for me to share the work that I do and the resources from the Greater Good Science Center. I know many of you have had a long day of training and workshops and are ready to go outside for a walk and to play with friends and family. And I hope you have a sense of accomplishment for the hard work that you've done and the knowledge that you've gained today. And for me, once again, it's quite special to know that I'm able to share this science and these resources with people all over the world. And I'm grateful. Thank you very much.